devices with no consequences. This creates a double standard in law that has generated a litany of secondary harmful effects on children and families. The United States Supreme Court in Ashcroft versus American Civil Liberties Union found that the legislative branch may undoubtedly act to encourage the use of filters. It could also take steps to promote their development by industry and their use by parents. This decision is the means by which the Supreme Court's signal to the state legislative branch that it could pass filter legislation such as this act. It will survive judicial review since filters are the least restrictive means for purposes of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution found in Ginsburg versus New York that a physical display statute, state requiring physical brick and mortar stores to put physical obscene material behind a physical blind rack, was constitutional under the First Amendment, heightening scrutiny. Likewise, a digital blinder rack statute, such as in the Act to Prevent Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation, requires digital retailers to put digital obscene material behind a digital blinder rack, which is also constitutional on the same legal basis. The Supreme Court of the United States has repeatedly held that the states have a compelling interest to uphold community standards of decency, as reflected with this bill, is rationally related to a narrowly tailored, compelling government interest. So the Act to Prevent Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation is not overly broad because the filters are not required to block by default all pieces of obscene content on the internet individually, but only certain stagnant websites that are known to facilitate human trafficking and prostitution, and websites that display X-rated material that is injurious to minors. Sex trafficking has substantially moved from the street corner to the smartphone. This means that making websites facilitating human trafficking and prostitution inaccessible by default, internet-enabled devices will do more to curb the demand for such offenses, more so than any other means since the inception of the internet, having a positive impact on reducing incarceration. The state is generally opposed to online censorship unless the content is injurious to children or promotes human trafficking. Only then is the state for limited censorship that accords with the First Amendment burden shifting principles. For more than 2 decades, the retailers and manufacturers of internet-enabled devices have marketed their products as quote-unquote family-friendly in a manner that constitutes false advertising and indecent, deceptive trade practices. The state is not anti-technology, but instead a scaling back the dark side of technology in a manner that accords with existing product liability laws enacted by the state. Over 20 states have resolved that pornography distributed through internet-enabled devices has created a public health crisis, and this act to prevent human trafficking and child exploitation is the best solution to the unresolved problem. In conclusion, I ask this committee to consider the hundreds of thousands of voiceless children who have become trapped in this rapidly growing, currently $150 billion industry of child trafficking. Shutting off the open conduits and snaring children is a logical step I ask each of you to seriously consider, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Representative Sampson, and I see that we have some committee questions for you. Go ahead, Senator Quinn.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Representative Sampson. I'm wondering so are you picturing that when someone attempted to access this type of material that they would have to enter their birth date? Is that what this would accomplish?
Well, I think, that would be part of it. And, there could be paywalls that are put up. There are some options that could be done. I think that's I had that initially in this bill, but we took some of that out to simplify the bill. And just if we can get this into statute, then we can be looking at some of the specifics on that level.
Okay, thank you.
Committee members, are there other questions for the bill sponsor? I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much, Representative Sampson. And it's the custom in this committee that we allow sponsors to stay on the panel. And so you're welcome to stay if you'd like.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Senator.
Okay. And I think there's a number of people who have signed up to testify in support of this legislation. And I believe that Representative Quint is here, and I'm going to recognize the representative first, and then ask those who are in the attendee space who would like to testify to please raise their electronic hands and keep them raised until you've been called to the panel. So that's in favor of 1719. Please raise your electronic hand. And Representative Quint, welcome to the Judiciary Committee. You can proceed with your testimony whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. If you lose me, I'm sorry. I'm at an unstable area and I'm using someone else's internet, so I'm at someone else's house right now. My name is Tracy Quinn. I represent House District 144, which includes Amity, Bancroft, Benedicta, Cary, Glenwood, Haynesville, Hodgdon, Holton, Macwahock, Orient, Reed, Weston, Molunkus, Silver Ridge, and South Aroostook. Senator Carney, Representative Harnett, and esteemed colleagues of the committee, I thank you for this opportunity to bring more awareness to an issue surrounding the exploitation of our children. This bill addresses the exposure of often dangerous and disturbing images to our children that once seen cannot be unseen. It is not just the exposure to the strong pornographic nature of the material that is detrimental, but also the dangers that often lurk within these sites where predators are waiting to pounce. As more children are given access to these sites, often by parents handing over a cell phone in the name of safety, we are seeing that this very thing is a dangerous, unintended consequence. Evil does exist, and it seeks out to harm the innocent. Children are targets of this exploitation. It is amazing to me that websites are able to find, edit, and delete content that does not fit narratives, but they claim they are unable to manage content surrounding child exploitation, abuse, and human trafficking. I'm a strong advocate for personal freedoms, but a filter on the most egregious sites does not take away from our First Amendment right, as it still allows for access to these sites and autonomy of thought. It would only require an additional step to gain that access, and this is where a layer of protection for our children comes into play. If there is any way to head off this type of early exposure for our children, it would be a step in the right direction. I strongly urge you to join Representative Sampson in her endeavor to protect our children and vote ought to pass on this bill. Thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Representative Quint. Committee members, are there any questions for Representative Quint? I'm not seeing any. We appreciate you providing testimony today. And at this point, I'll bring over Tiffany Marler.
Hello.
Testimony. And Tiffany Marler, once you've joined the panel, could you please activate your audio and video and go ahead with your testimony?
Hi. Can you all see me okay and hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, my name is Tiffany Marlar, and I'm the Director of Missouri for Special Forces of Liberty, and I'm also the federal champion for this bill and the SOCA bill for 2022. I am thank you for hearing me today, but I'm also very, very strongly testifying in approval for this bill. I'm very happy to hear that you guys are considering it for the 2021 session before the 2022 begins. I've heard a lot of strong points, so I'm not going to cover the points that I've already heard Heidi Sampson say. So I would like to cover something that I have not heard anybody say. The grant funding that will become available through the Attorney General's office in your state and every other state would provide wonderful benefits that we do not have in every single state that comes down through each state. This bill would provide equitable measures for your state that you do not have to provide monetary benefits for victim compensations, shelters for sex trafficking victims, child advocacy centers, family counseling centers, regional nonprofits for civil legal services to provide legal assistance for sexual victims, and grants for the students of survivors and victims themselves. This is a push and a movement that I have been personally working on for 5.5 years, and it is now finally coming to fruition. This is something that has not been heard of in 20 to 30 years. This is a research project that is an international broken down to a national, to a state level. And I am strongly, strongly asking, as not only a survivor leader, but a major component and supporter of this bill, that you strongly, please, I'm asking you to consider moving forward with this first part of this bill, because this is a long-standing movement, but this will help set the movement forward for the entire country. And that's all I can really say.
Thank you very much. I do have one preliminary question for you, which is that everyone who provides testimony before this committee is asked and is required by our committee rules to let us know where they reside. And I don't think you
St. Louis,
included
Missouri.
that in your testimony.
I'm sorry, St. Louis, Missouri. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Committee members, any questions for Tiffany Marlar? Go ahead, Representative Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Friday, so I'm on alternative technology and don't have an electronic hand. Thank you for being here today, Ms. Marlar. My question would be, I'm trying to figure out what the downside is here. What would the opposition to this bill even be?
We've had a little bit of opposition with the first writing of this bill, where I had some national opposition for the deactivation filter fee, but we've been able to get a workaround with that, where we're going to have another bill written after the SOCA bill. But the problem is with it, in all honesty, that's been from people who just honestly don't want their name written down. And I'm a researcher and I work with the federal government. And if you're wanting my honest opinion, this is something that we need to do to protect our children and our women and our men that are victims of sexual exploitation and human trafficking. Not only sexual trafficking, but labor trafficking, which is a huge problem in our country. If we do not start setting measures to protect our victims, then we have no accountability. And this ranges all the way down from low-level offenders all the way up to our elite offenders. And it's something that's not very much liked or talked about. We fight big billion-dollar corporations that don't want these measures set in place. They try to say that they have their deactivation filters set in place within their companies. But that's the type of money that we're fighting. They don't want to do it. And that's where we're at right now. So it's states upon states and the federal government fighting against the state governments. And that's where I see it happening right now, because it's a new movement, a new measure trying to fight the big oligarch companies.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I see that Senator Keim has a question for you as well. Go ahead, Senator Keim.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Ms. Marlar.
You're welcome.
I was wondering, Representative Sampson mentioned the health crisis and the impact of this on the population, especially on children. But I wonder if you could offer a little more insight into what that impact is, and also if there are any studies or anything that you could share.
Yes.
And maybe give to the committee along with your testimony.
Actually, I just attended a symposium at the International Harvard University and the Christian academies. sorry, I have a TBI, so please bear with me. We just found out that during COVID, we have a huge crisis coming about. I did a speech at the Biden's inauguration for healthcare workers for human trafficking as the survivor speaker. And the research studies that I'm involved in right now are kind of twofold with the COVID-19 crisis. We have a huge problem that we're getting ready to come into with domestic violence, sexual exploitation with the actual platforms of the internet. Something that that nobody's talking about except for us and our circles is how are we going to manage what we had as 30 to 40%, we're looking at a 60 to 80% increase into the prevalence of healthcare workers that we do not have, that we're going to need into a critical infrastructure of dealing